Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're heading back into Tolkien territory, but this time it's not about hobbits or rings. Well, it's a little about the ring,
Right.
but mainly we're looking at Saruman the White. Our listener wants to understand,
I can see why.
like he starts as this super powerful wizard,
Yeah.
right? The wisest of the Istari,
Yeah.
sent to Middle-earth to defeat Sauron. He leads the White Council,
Gandalf, Galadriel, all answering to him.
and he's got Orthanc, this amazing tower.
For a time, it seems like he's unstoppable.
But then he falls. Hard. Like, how does that happen?
Yeah.
Luckily, you brought some sources that really get into it.
What's fascinating is that Saruman's initial position, all that authority, might have been his downfall.
Mm.
Imagine the pressure, the fate of Middle-earth on his shoulders.
Oh, yeah. It's one thing when it's you and your fellowship on a quest,
Yeah.
but to lead everyone.
Exactly. And the sources highlight Saruman's obsession with the One Ring. But it's not just greed, it's deeper than that.
Like, he wants to outsmart Sauron.
He wants to understand him. Sauron's power, almost as if he's studying some forbidden text.
But the line between knowledge and desire, that can get blurry fast.
And Tolkien is a master at showing that gradual shift.
Right.
We see Saruman convince himself that he could use the ring for good, ends justify the means, and all that.
Chilling stuff. Like when he uses the Palantir
The seam stone.
to connect with Sauron. In the books, you get this feeling of dread, like he's stepping onto a path of no return.
He thinks he can outmaneuver Sauron, but Sauron's been playing the long game for centuries.
Right, like trying to outsmart a grandmaster chess player after just learning the rules.
The films actually capture that moment really well. Christopher Lee as Saruman, when he first looks into the Palantir, his eyes change, his voice gets this raspy edge. You can see the corruption taking hold.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Gives me chills just thinking about it. But it's not just Sauron twisting his mind, right? Saruman chooses this. There's that line in the book where he tells Gandalf, "We must have power, power to order all things as we will."
That's not about defeating Sauron.
Right. That's about control.
That's the heart of it. The sources argue that Saruman represents this dangerous idea that being smart means you get to rule.
Oh, interesting.
He's so convinced he's brilliant that he doesn't see the moral problems with that.
And that's where the connection to today comes in, right?
Yeah.
Because we see this all the time.
Exactly. With tech companies, politicians, anyone who thinks they know best, the desire for order, for control, can blind even people with good intentions.
Which is so different from Gandalf. They both start wanting to defeat Sauron, but their ideas about power are totally opposite.
Gandalf empowers others, builds alliances. He has this humble wisdom that Saruman just loses.
You know what always got me, though?
Yeah.
How Tolkien describes Saruman's voice.
Yeah.
Beautiful, persuasive,
Yes.
but then it becomes a weapon.
Tolkien was brilliant with languages. He understood how words could be used for manipulation,
Oh, wow.
just as powerful as any army. Saruman, with his silver tongue, he really embodies that danger.
Makes you think twice about those charismatic leaders we run into, doesn't it?
It does. That's what makes this story so captivating. It's not just good versus evil, it's human nature. Choices we make when faced with power and temptation. And as we dig deeper into his fall, we'll see even more of how complex he is.
All right, so where do we go next? How does this corruption actually start showing up in what Saruman does?
Well, let's talk about Isengard, because that's where it really becomes impossible to ignore.
All right, let's do it. Isengard, here we come.
He takes this beautiful valley, Isengard, guarded by Fangorn Forest, all that nature.
Right, peaceful.
And he turns it into this industrial wasteland, just churning out weapons.
The sources you gave me describe these furnaces, just belching smoke, trees being cut down, the clang of metal everywhere. It's so different from how it's supposed to be.
And that's where Tolkien's message about nature really comes through.
Oh, interesting.
Saruman in Isengard, it's like a warning about what happens when we try to dominate nature. You know, like for progress.
Makes you think about climate change, right? Those hard choices between what we want now versus what the planet needs.
Exactly. It's like Saruman gets so focused on beating Sauron that he forgets what he's actually fighting for.
And then there's the Uruk-hai,
Yeah.
creating these twisted orcs just for war. That's taking things to a whole other level.
The sources point this out as a turning point. Saruman isn't just using power anymore, he's twisting it, making life just to destroy.
It's like he becomes the very thing he's trying to stop. Sauron's all about domination, bending life to his will. And Saruman ends up doing the same.
But even with all that darkness, we still see glimpses of who Saruman was. In the book, when he confronts Gandalf at Orthanc,
Yeah.
you see these moments of regret. Like, he knows he's messed up, but he just can't admit it.
That's the tragic part. He's not just some evil villain. Tolkien gives us enough to know that Saruman was once wise, maybe even good, but that pride gets in the way, that inability to back down.
And it costs him everything, his friendship with Gandalf, his place on the White Council, even his voice. It becomes harsh, twisted.
It's like watching a train wreck in slow motion. You want to shout, "Stop!" but it's too late.
And that's what makes his story so important even today. It reminds us that everyone has the potential for darkness. Even the smartest people can be tempted by power.
So what are we supposed to do? Be suspicious of anyone who's ambitious?
Not really. It's about seeing the signs, the arrogance, the isolating themselves, making excuses. Saruman shows us what to watch out for.
So it's a call to be careful.
To keep our leaders in check. And to look at our own ambitions, too. Why do we want what we want? Are we falling into the same traps as Saruman?
Whoa, that's deep. But that's what's so cool about Tolkien. These fantasy stories, they get so real, so human.
Speaking of human, there's another part of Saruman's fall that we should talk about. It's not just about power, it's his relationship with Gandalf. There's envy there, and maybe even a little bit of a hurt ego.
Oh, yeah.
Some sources suggest Saruman felt threatened by Gandalf's influence growing.
Gandalf connecting with the hobbits, inspiring hope.
Right, things that Saruman, even with all his wisdom, didn't seem to have.
It's like he's looking at Gandalf thinking, wait, why him? Why not me?
And that resentment, that feeling of being in someone's shadow, it pushes him further down the wrong path.
It shows that even the wisest people can get jealous, and that those little feelings can have huge consequences. Just human nature.
And that's probably why Tolkien made their relationship more than just disagreeing about how to use power. It adds so much depth, makes it tragic.
And speaking of how things are shown, I think it's worth talking about Saruman in the books versus the movies.
Oh, definitely.
Christopher Lee, he's amazing.
Iconic.
But the films simplify Saruman a lot.
The movies make him a clear villain, and they show how scary he can be, those intense eyes, that voice. But in the books, we see him struggling inside, slowly becoming evil. It's more subtle, more tragic, and more real.
Like, the films don't really show him trying to use the ring for good. It's like he's with Sauron from the start.
Right, and that works for a movie, visually, but it makes him less complex. In the books, we see him fighting with his choices, justifying what he does, even as he's getting worse.
So in the books, he's not just a bad guy you can easily hate.
It's more like real life. People are complicated.
It makes you think more. So, to wrap up this part of our deep dive, it seems like Saruman's story isn't just about power corrupting, it's about ambition, messing up how we see things, about being isolated, being too proud, and about knowing ourselves.
It's a warning for all of us, whether we have magic staffs or are just trying to get through life.
Because we all have a bit of Saruman in us, right?
We all want to be right, to do things our way, but we need to recognize that and use it for good.
So, be more like Gandalf, hopeful and wise.
Exactly. And remember, even when things are tough, there's always a chance for good to win.
I like that. So what happens next? Where does Saruman end up?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting. What's crazy is that losing at Isengard, that's not the end for Saruman. In the books, he's got this whole other chapter.
Oh, yeah.
He's lost his power, but not his sneaky ways.
He ends up back in the Shire. Can you believe that? The one place he looked down on, that's where he makes his last stand.
It's like poetry, right? This once mighty wizard, now scheming in the shadows.
Tolkien's showing us that power can look like a lot of different things.
Saruman might not have armies or magic anymore,
Yeah.
but he's still trying to control people, pull the strings.
And it works. For a while, at least. The hobbits, they're so used to peace and quiet, they don't even recognize him at first. Then he turns their whole world upside down.
It's like a twisted version of what he did to Isengard, right?
Totally.
Instead of industry, it's the small-scale tyranny. He messes with their simple way of life.
Tolkien's so smart with those parallels. It really drives home that Saruman just needs to be in control, no matter what.
It's not about ruling Middle-earth anymore. It's about bending everything to his will. Even something as small as the Shire.
It's like those Sarumans we see in everyday life.
Oh, I know what you mean.
The boss who micromanages everything.
Yeah.
Or that friend who's always manipulating you.
That need to control, it can be so sneaky.
It seems harmless, but it's not.
And the thing is, even after all he's done, Saruman still thinks he's right. Remember that line in the book? He says, "I am Saruman the Wise, Saruman Ringmaker, Saruman of many colors."
He's still holding on to those titles. Like, they matter after everything that's happened.
It's like his final act of self-destruction. He underestimates the hobbits, their strength, their goodness. He tries to control them, but they're the ones who escape his grasp.
It shows that power isn't always about force or magic.
Sometimes it's about standing up for what's right, even when it feels impossible.
So back to what we've been talking about this whole time. What do we learn from Saruman's fall?
It's a warning about ambition, that wanting control too much, that's dangerous. And we need to be humble.
Because we all have a little bit of Saruman in us, you know? We want to be right, do things our way.
Exactly. But we need to see that in ourselves and use it for good.
So be more like Gandalf.
Be the light, be wise.
I like that. Less Saruman, more Gandalf.
And remember, even when things are tough, good can always win.
Well, this has been quite the deep dive. We've learned so much about Saruman, haven't we? It's amazing how these stories, even though they're fantasy, they teach us about ourselves, about real life. It makes you think, doesn't it? About power, about temptation, about the choices we make, and how those choices shape who we become. Thanks for joining us on this journey. We hope you've seen Saruman in a new light. Keep exploring those big questions, and thanks for taking the deep dive with us.